Hello, and welcome to the Right Room with Hilary Phelps. Today I'm talking to Meg Geisewite. And Meg is one of the first people who taught me about the concept of gray area drinking. Her story, our stories are completely different. Meg was a social drinker and realized in this one moment that maybe alcohol was taking a bigger presence in her life than she would have wanted. So Meg is the author of Intoxicating Lies. She's the leader of the group Right Back to You, which is this beautiful community of women. And I think everybody is going to take a lot from this conversation. Meg and I really dive into not just sobriety, but a lot about female intuition, empowerment, listening to that inner voice. And so without further ado, here's Meg. Good morning, Meg. How are you?
Good morning. Good. So good to see you again so soon.
It's so good. I know I had the pleasure of seeing you this weekend, and I can't wait to talk more about that. But I'm excited for this conversation because you are truly, and we've both said this, kind of those people that you meet and you could just talk to them for hours and hours and hours, and time kind of flies by. And we joked that we're going to have to keep the rails on this conversation, or else it'll be
Days.
it'll go on for days. It'll go on for days.
I feel like you're a kindred soul, a kindred spirit of mine.
I feel the same way. I love that. And we don't live that far away from one another. And so I was thinking that this morning.
So we're really lucky.
Yeah. I'm like, I would like to make more of an effort to see each other and like have lunch or just have those moments. So as you know, so the Right Room is this safe space for women to be able to come on and tell their stories of transition, and transition can look like anything. I think as women, we all navigate a lot of transitions in our life, from having children leaving the house, menopause, addiction, drinking, which we're going to talk about, are two separate things, I think, for the purpose of this conversation, right? And divorce and changing jobs, like all of these things. And so tell everyone here just a little bit about you. Who's Meg?
Sure. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm just so honored to be with you and to spend this time with you. So I am a mother of two. I have a 17-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son. I've been in pharmaceutical sales in rare disease for the past, I would say, 12 years. And I also have a background, and we can even talk about this, where when I was really caught up in my perfectionism, selling women on looking their best I launched the two biggest wrinkle fixers in the world. So I was really drinking down the perfectionism Kool-Aid, I guess you could say, part of my sales career. I'm also what I would call a transformational guide. So I have a women's community where we explore 12 topics of emotional sobriety over a year. The women loved it so much they don't want it to end. So we're still going. And we just had a retreat where you were the speaker this past weekend. And because I'm not a coach, I have my sister who is a licensed therapist who supports the women as they go through their transformations. And it's a community called Right Back to You, which is where we take journal prompts and work through these emotions and transitions and topics, and we discuss them. And the bonding that has occurred with these women is just so beautiful to witness. So I have that. And I have my book, Intoxicating Lies. So I'm also an author. And it is one woman's journey to freedom from gray area drinking. So I really take the reader through my sobriety, or really through my sober curious journey in 2019. And in 2019, when I became sober curious, I really resonated with this term called gray area drinking, which is in the medical literature. And I had learned about it from Jolene Park, who is the leading authority on gray area drinking, and Jen Couch, who is the founder of SoberSys, and whose program I joined in November of 2019. So I'm almost 5 years alcohol free. So I'll be celebrating that next month. And I couldn't find any books at the time on gray area drinking, and I love to read. So I thought, oh, I'll just read all the gray area drinking books. And I couldn't find one. Meanwhile, I was journaling. And so 1,000 words later, I had basically half of a book. And all of the women in my group said, Meg, we need this book. Women need this book, especially after the pandemic, because I had quit right before the pandemic. So hence, that's how Intoxicating Lies was born. So I'm doing those four things, I guess. I've been married for 21 years. And so I am just feeling very, very blessed to live this alcohol-free life, and just it spiritually awakened me, which you and I have discussed many times.
Isn't it, I think, so many so many things to go with on this, because I say I'm a transformation architect, and so I love that you're a guide, right? And
Guide.
yeah, I love that. And so before you, right, because we've talked about this, our stories are completely different, right? And we both agreed and have said in multiple conversations that there need to be more stories. And so women can see themselves in, we all want to be represented and see ourselves in stories and podcasts and movies, and right. And so when I got sober, the only thing I knew was When a Man Loves a Woman with Meg Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
And there were no books, because in 2007,
Right.
there was like two, right? And so I'm like, I'm not that, I'm not drinking vodka before work or sneaking it. So therefore I don't have a problem. And so I love this, but I will completely credit you for introducing me to gray area drinking, because the only thing I really knew, right, is even as someone in the recovery space, I've been sober for 17 years, like I only knew me. Like, this is how I drink. I drink it to a blackout. If I want to quit drinking, I have, I chose to go to rehab to make my chances of staying sober the highest as possible. But when I heard your story and read your book, it's like, oh, there are other options.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you take us back to 2019, kind of the moment before you made that decision? I mean, what was it like leading up to that moment of putting down the drink? And what kind of drinker were you?
So I initially was just that, I guess, social drinker who drank on the weekends, never during the week. It was never a problem. And then what happened was I had 3 back-to-back life issues. So my husband lost his job. I became the primary income maker for our family, which was an enormous amount of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
We lost our best friend unexpectedly.
Mm-hmm.
It was extremely traumatic the way that we lost him. And so that was extremely stressful. And at the same time, I had a loved one come forward where I was her safe person for, and I'll just say there's a trigger warning here in case anybody needs to, and I'm not going to go into any detail, but she was sexually molested as a child, and she was finally ready to get justice. I, in my book, talk
Meg.
about my sexual assaults. And what happened was when I started navigating her sexual assaults, it brought up all of mine that I thought I had dealt with in talk therapy, but then had realized was still living in my body, and I really needed to do somatic therapy, but didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
So what did I do? I turned to alcohol, and I was crying, I would say every night. And my husband would come into my bedroom with a glass of wine, and he didn't know what to do with me either.
Yeah.
The emotions were at an all-time high, the anxiety at a high level. I would say depression was there, just overwhelmed with what to do with all of these, I would say, just big life changes that were occurring. And so I kept drinking every night as self-care. It was my me time.
Mm-hmm.
It was the only time in the day where I felt like the mental chatter was being shut off.
I'm
And it
familiar.
was going pretty fiercely all day long. And the other thing I didn't realize is that I was addicted, and Brene Brown calls it, and I talk about it in my book, called overfunctioning. So I was staying in an overfunctioning hustle, grind, win the sales awards, just keep producing because you need to earn your worth. And I had lost a lot of my self-worth in these 2 sexual assaults that had happened to me. And so I didn't even know it, but I was addicted to overfunctioning as well. So I was caught up in this mad pace. And the only time I was slowing down and taking care of myself was in a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
And so this nightly wine habit started. And I remember, and I have a chapter in the book where I had finally worked up the courage to tell my therapist, I think I might have a drinking problem, because this had gone on for a couple of years. And I was seeing a therapist, right? So I thought I was like taking care of myself.
And
But
how much were you drinking every night, approximately?
some nights it was one glass, and a
Okay.
lot of nights it was three big glasses, which is a
Okay.
bottle of wine.
Uh-huh.
So it was a bottle quite frequently. And I remember telling her, all this back and forth in my head, where I would wake up and I would do like this strenuous workout, even bike 20 miles to prove to myself that I was in control.
Yeah.
And I would eat the greasy food and line my stomach, or try to eat the kale salad at lunch to prove that I was still healthy. And it was like this constant detox to retox loop, where this is Jen Couch's, she coined that phrase, retox to detox. And I just felt so stuck in this. As soon as the sun would set at 5 p.m., something would switch in my brain that said, you deserve this. You've earned this. Look at your workout. Look at the sales you achieved today. Look at how you took care of your kids, the house, your marriage. And I felt dutiful yet dead. I was just checking off the boxes, taking care of everyone's needs, needing to do it perfectly, looking perfectly at the time,
Yeah.
selling women on the notion that they needed to look perfect too, even if the background was a shit show, right?
Yeah.
We can make this
Yeah.
facade look beautiful. And what no one knew was that behind the closed doors was a woman who was internally and silently beating herself up
Mm.
on a daily basis, that looking at everybody saying, I've got this. And my own therapist at that time said to me, no, I think you're thinking about this too much. So her ill advice kept my gray area of drinking going. But it
Mm.
wasn't until I listened to my own inner knowing. Some people
That's
call it the
right.
Holy Spirit. Some people call it intuition. Some people call it unconditional love, God, whatever it is that you call it. It's that small, gentle whisper. It's not that raging chatter that I talked about that the wine would shut off. It's when you slow down, and I could hear just ever so slightly, this is not serving us. You need to explore this. And I remember looking at the Sober Sis ads for months and just thinking, well, I can quit for a couple weeks at a time. So I don't know if I really need this. And I don't know if I really want to break up with this. And I finally got to the point where it scared me, because I no longer wanted my kids to do sports in the evenings, because I wanted to come home to my rewarding glass of wine. And that was the point where it scared me, because I was like, wow, this is in control of me. My husband found another job. My friend who lost her husband was in a new relationship. My loved one was getting her life back together. Everybody was getting better but me. I was stuck with this nightly wine habit, and I could not get out of it. And I was in a shame cycle that was just
Mm.
vicious. And so that point of not wanting my kids to do sports so that I could come home and drink, I knew I was headed to a darker shade of gray. Now, there are many shades. That alcoholism is on a spectrum, on an alcohol use disorder spectrum. And that's why it's so important that we talk about all the different shades, so that we can catch women upstream, possibly, who are starting to hear that voice, this, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Why do we have to wait until we have a DUI, or our jobs that are in the throes, or people are telling us you need help? Like, why do we have to wait to that point? And we live in a culture that is, number one, instant gratification, right? We want to be an instant fix, and we compare ourselves. So I was reading the books that were the rock bottom stories, and I was saying, I'm not that bad. I'm fine, right? I don't need to quit. And so I think when we share these different shades of gray, we give the permission slip to different people on their journey to say, yes, you get to explore this just because of the health of it, or just because you're starting to feel sick and tired of being sick and tired, or someone is telling you you need to go get help. Like there's all these different stories, and they're all valid, and they're all need to be heard so that we can at least get curious and have compassion for ourselves to say, what is happening here for me? And so when I joined Sober Sis, I will be honest with you, I didn't want to break up with alcohol. I just wanted to get a few tools under my tool belt to go back to being a quote unquote normal drinker, whatever the hell that means. Who knows,
We all
right?
have that dream.
Yeah. So I went into it like, oh, 21 days, I'll be all fit, that instant gratification. And
I just need a break from it, and then I'll be able to go back to,
I'll be good in 21 days.
Yeah.
What ended up happening was, because I'm in pharmaceutical sales and I love the science of things, I started diving into the science, and I was like, wait a second, this is a neurotoxin? Wait, why aren't labels on the bottle that says this is a carcinogen? Why aren't we told that this is highly addictive, up there with meth and cocaine? And
what did you find? What did you find?
And so I'm finding all these truths about alcohol. That's a neurotoxin, a depressant on our central nervous system. And I'm like, so why am I having Prosecco with my kale salad? Like, that doesn't even make sense.
Balances.
Why am I using a depressant to celebrate at the weddings? I just became more and more curious. My eczema started to clear up. I started sleeping better. And I thought, well, this is all interesting. And so I kept reading more and exploring more. And I thought, I'm going to do 60 days. And then she came out with a second program for a 90-day program, which would take me to 100 days. And I was like, well, let's see how this goes, because my conversations at work were getting better. My relationships were getting better. I was fighting less with my husband. I felt more present with my kids and less edgy. Like I wasn't, irritated with them, and I had more patience with them. And when my daughter said to me, Mom, you have so much more patience, it was like, whoa, they're noticing this. And so at 100 days, something really shifted in my brain. Like I started viewing it exactly. I was telling my brain, I was rewiring it and saying, do you really want a highly addictive drug tonight? Do you want gasoline? Do you want poison? Do you want a depressant? Do you want a neurotoxin? Like, this is how I started talking to myself. And my brain was saying, no. And I was using mocktails as substitutions when I had cravings, which was beautiful, because at that point, now there are a gazillion of them.
Yes.
And because the cravings were real and they were still there. And my husband said to
me,
Can I
interrupt you for a second?
Oh,
when you
yes,
say cravings, no. When you talk about cravings, talk more about the cravings. What kind of cravings? Was it emotional craving, a mental craving, a physical craving? Like, what did that look like for you when you were experiencing these?
I think it was the 5 o'clock, because that was always when I drank. I didn't drink during the day. So it was my brain that was used to, that was the signal. The kids are in bed.
Routine.
And routine. We just made a big Italian meal and the fire's going, and this is the perfect time for a red glass of wine. Do you know
romanticizing of it.
Yes, the romanticizing.
Yeah.
And I was learning how, in the same time, to take care of myself. Like, what you and I have talked about this. What do I really need? I needed rest. I needed to go into the room and meditate for 5 to 10 minutes. I needed to go for a walk. I needed to get on the phone and talk to a friend, or one of the women in my group. But the women in my group community was key, because we would jump online on Marco Polo and say, I'm having a craving. And everyone would come in and be like, I'm here for you. You can make this awesome mocktail. I tried this tonight. Try mixing this. And we held each other accountable. And, I did my first wedding and my first sales meeting. And I talk all about this in the book.
Yeah.
So it was really at that 100 days that my husband looked at me, and I was showing up so differently. And he said, I think I'm going to quit drinking. And I was like, well, don't do this for me. This has to be your own decision. And so he quit on his own, like the unicorn 1% of people that can, and just did it on his own. I know. We're all like, how did you do that?
Talk
And
about willpower.
yeah, talk about willpower. I mean, we went through a transition. I talk about this too in the book where
Mm.
we alcohol was at the center of our relationship. It was how we came together to connect over a bottle of wine after the kids were put in bed. So now what? How do we reconnect? And I felt raw and really emotional
Yeah.
when I was becoming so, going through it with my 100 days. It was like
Yeah.
everything bothered me. I felt like I had no skin.
Yeah.
Everybody was getting on my nerves. And so it was a lot of transformation that was occurring. And so yeah, I just kept knowing that inner knowing kept saying like, this is it. This is, I was waking up to going on walks and finding the beauty in the day, and like that gratitude, those glimmers, I was
Yeah.
finding my mindset was now starting to shift into an attitude for gratitude. I got into somatic therapy. I got the trauma out of my body. And I got into a program called Shift into Alignment. And I woke up to the fact that I was in this dreaded drama triangle of staying a victim,
Yeah.
a rescuer. I had to rescue somebody, like my loved one, or a persecutor, which I was judging people. And I would ping pong in this dreaded drama triangle, which is based on a book called TED, which is the,
You
um,
recommended that to me.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's the empowerment dynamic by David Emerald. And it's a short little read. And what I realized is that I get to be the creator of my life. I get to put up boundaries. I get to choose how I show up and who I want to be with. And this whole, so now I was having another mind shift, right? Once alcohol was, and that was, I would say, a year or so, right? Like getting alcohol out of the picture took a solid year or so.
Mhm.
And now I'm starting to shift into the emotional sobriety mindset. And everything that I learned in this course is what I'm teaching the women in Right Back to You. And so it's the emotional sobriety, which is the second phase, in my opinion, right? Because you remove the thing that numbed you, and now you have to deal with all the stuff that you had numbed out to for years. But how do you do that? We don't have an earth school, as Elizabeth Gilbert says. So that is kind of where, I'm sorry, it was a long story, but that's kind of where and how everything came to be.
Yeah. And to your point, like I think emotional sobriety is the hardest
Yeah.
in across the board. And what I mean by that is, um, even for someone that identifies as an addict and someone with substance use disorder, right? Like when I'm not well now, even at 17 years sober, it always goes back to the emotional sobriety, right? And then that's where we have the choice. I have the choice to, like you're saying, I can go for a walk, I can do a meditation, I can show up for myself, or I can be that victim and that person that's like, or the martyr, right? For the martyr. No, I've got too much. I've got to take care of this and I've got to do this and I've got to show up for other people. And so I can't do that for myself. And,
Yeah.
there are people that have long-term sobriety who aren't sober. And I don't mean in the sense of they're not drinking,
Right.
right? But they're angry and kind of, they take it out on someone else. So you can see them yelling, giving someone the cruel gesture if they cut them off in traffic, things like that. And it's like, well, I didn't stop drinking to be that either, right? And so to your point, that emotional sobriety is just so important across the board in everybody, right? But I think, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. I don't know that we can get to that emotional sober place without putting down alcohol first.
I agree because alcohol really makes you like, it's a depressant, right? And it kind of keeps you in that woe is me martyr, or like it just doesn't allow you to connect with that inner knowing. It was so disconnected and fogged out.
Yes.
And so the very first thing that I teach and Right Back to You is, what is intuition? How do we hear it? What blocks it? And how do I meditate? Because I think women think like, oh, I've got to be a Zen monk and sit and, for 30 minutes. No, it can be simply 5 minutes to start. And I talk about the monkey mind as, doers and overfunctioners and perfectionism, which I also talk about perfectionism. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing if we're in an adaptive place with it, not maladaptive. But when we can become the observer of our thoughts and not judge them, and get to this place where we can sit with the monkey mind and say, oh, of course you're popping up. Of course. And I tell women, get it all out. Like, maybe before you meditate, just get in your journal and brain dump for like 5 minutes of just all the thoughts. Like, you're worried about this and why did that happen? And then just take some deep breaths and put your hand on your heart and listen to what that inner knowing is saying. And I have, based on Elizabeth Gilbert's two-way prayer in my book, a really great journal prompt from Elizabeth Gilbert, which is on her Love Letters Substack, which is, if I could give just one journal prompt for your listeners to do, is, again, you could write, dear love, dear inner knowing, what would you have me know today? And then just get still and quiet and hear what comes up, because that little girl within you, that inner knowing, she has a lot to say, and she wants to be heard, loved, and validated. That's all that she wants. And she is always guiding you back to the truth of who you are. And so we just don't take the time to slow down and listen to her. And I talk about this too, is like, go back to, and you talk about this, go back to when you were a little girl. What brought you joy? What did you love to do? Maybe the journal prompt is, and we did this when we had a topic on joy, awe, and wonder in my group. Dear Joy, what would you have me know today? Gosh, women are so disconnected from their bodies and their joy and their desires. What brings you alive as a woman, right?
And it's okay to love anything. And I've shared this book ad nauseum, probably on here at least every other podcast, but that Women That Run with the Wolves, it's like, we're okay the way we are, but we're told in this society as women, if you like food, like, you're grotesque and overweight, like, you're supposed to look this way, right? If you like money, like, that's just rude. Like, women don't talk about money. If you like sex, then you're promiscuous and you're not. And it's like, it doesn't mean any of those things. It's just what we're told to stay in this box. Don't color outside the lines. If you're a good girl, you put your feet on the floor, you don't sweat, you better shave your armpits, like all those things, right? And it doesn't
bring us any joy, because it's a maddening box.
Yes. And that's where that perfectionism and that comes in.
Yes.
But you and I have that in common too. And because when I was drinking, I was like, well, if I look okay on the outside, then it doesn't matter if I'm burning alive on the inside, right? And something else you talked about, like, we, in my recovery program, it's the not yets. Like, I didn't have a DUI. I didn't total a car. The not yet, right? Like, that's waiting for me. And I think you made a really good visual on that with the gray, you don't have to go to the dark gray yet. But that's kind of like,
it's coming if you don't get off the
it's not going to go the opposite
drinking highway.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And so what are some of the challenges, after that first year? Because, all the firsts are also really hard, like the wedding, the sales meet, right? But there's this, you do it once, it kind of strengthens that muscle to know that, okay, I can do it again. But there's a fear in that, right? So how did you navigate the fear in doing some of these things for the first time?
Yeah, I really had a lot of self-compassion. So I would show up to the parties and it felt awkward. It felt like I needed it to be funny, or I needed it to dance, or I needed it. And what I started leaning into is, why do I feel like I need to show up for other people in a certain way? What do I want? Do I want to be at a party? What is it that I really want? And it's that I really wanted the meaningful conversations and connections, like when I talk to you, like these deep, deep conversations that bring my soul alive. In a loud, crowded bar with a ton of music and drinking, that's not sometimes fun for my soul. So it was discovering what brings me, like, what's in alignment for Meg, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes it was also that I did want to be at the party because there were good friends there. So I would bring a little cooler of my own drinks. And I just felt part of the festivities. Or I would order a non-alcoholic beer at the bar. And I just felt like I was part of the group. And so there were times that I felt uncomfortable, but I knew that sitting with that uncomfortable was teaching me that when my emotions come up, the anxiety, the
Yes.
fear, that it was teaching me how to sit with those hard feelings too and say, oh gosh, of course you feel scared, Meg. In sixth grade, when all of the girls ostracized you and you felt left out, that little girl is so scared that these people aren't going to like her. Of course, she's
Oh my
popping
God.
up right now with fear. But by sitting with that and being compassionate with myself and saying, that is so normal. That makes total sense why you're popping up this way. And those protective parts of us pop up. And I view them like little army people that are in full
I
like army gear. And they're like, I'm ready here to protect you. Right. And it's like, I see you. You've served me and protected me. You've even helped me thrive and survive for much of my life. Thank you for your service. But now I'm going to choose differently. I'm going to choose what's in alignment for me. I'm going to show up with whatever brings me joy. So if it is awkward and it is hard, know that it's actually good for you. It's teaching you how to be with those awkward, hard emotions too.
And we talked about this. I'd love to hear more this weekend at your at the retreat, right? Like
Yeah.
emotions are just information. And
Yes.
I was thinking about this morning before, our conversation. So often we say, well, I don't want to do that because it's going to end up like XYZ, right? So for example, I don't want to take a morning workout class because that means I'm going to be tired the rest of the day. So I'm not going to do it, right? So we already put these boundaries on ourselves before we can even experience it because we had that fear of the potential of it being challenging, hard, awkward, right? So we don't even allow ourselves to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But there's 50% chance it's going to be that way, but there's a 50% chance that we're going to love the class or we're going to have a really interesting conversation at this party. But so often we shut ourselves down because, to your point, we don't even want to go there to allow ourselves to sit in that discomfort
Yeah.
for just a little bit of time. And I think for me, and it sounds like for you too, that's when I would pick up the drink, right?
Yeah.
But that's when I would go to something outside of myself. That's when I
Yes.
would go to, and, full transparency. Now I just realize when I'm doing it, right? So before, meaning like, not drinking, but ice cream is my thing, right? So now I notice when I'm like, I'm kind of cranky or I'm tired or you know what, I'm just going to go eat ice cream. Like I know I'm doing it, but I have the choice on whether or not I'm going to allow myself to I'm going to put a scoop in a bowl and I'm going to enjoy it and I'm going to be fine with it versus that mindlessness of grabbing the bottle of wine or grabbing just the, whole ice cream and eating it at the feelings to try to
Yeah.
resolve the feelings instead of just saying, I'm going to sit here and feel awkward or uncomfortable or because nobody likes that. Right. But, Jewel,
Yeah.
the
The
singer,
singer. Yeah.
I'll just send you this pod. Someone sent it to me. And I've shared this with a lot of people. And she was on Joe Rogan recently and talks about this, or not recently, it was a couple of years ago, feelings, right? And they're two. So she talks about like the ocean. They're going to come and go. It's just like the ocean, the tide. Sometimes they're higher than others and sometimes the low tide is out, but know that everything is going to pass, right?
Yes.
And then another way to think about it that I love is our friend Laura Cathcart Robbins talks about this on this podcast. And she goes, the feelings are like children. You don't want them to drive the car, but you can't put them in the trunk. You just have to acknowledge that they're, kind of riding in the back seat. I'm like, yeah, yes,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Exactly. They're navigating what's in alignment for you and what's not and teaching or revealing something that may not be healed within. And if you ignore
Yeah.
them and you don't listen to them, and this is where I really encourage working with a coach or a
Mhm.
therapist, being in community, because doing this alone, you can get stuck, you can get isolated. And so when these hard times come up, we need support. We need help. It's
Yes.
okay to ask for help. As women,
Yeah.
we're told, just be strong, and that's where I felt, dutiful yet dead, like taking care of everyone else and not taking care of myself. And so it's really that, like you said, with the ocean, the ebb and flow, I
Mhm.
really feel like when things are challenges, when a trigger comes up or a hard emotion arises, it is an invitation to initially contract and maybe cry, maybe journal, whatever it is, you're going to contract, but then you're going to expand because it's an invitation to grow. It's
Yeah.
there and showing up to teach something to you, reveal something to you. It is a gift. And when you can start viewing life as a gift with all of the beauty and joy, which is equally as important in doing this work. When we're talking about emotional sobriety, I tell the women, you can get addicted to doing the inner work and the shadow work and the tough work. It is equally as important to find the joy in the day,
Yes.
to find what brings you alive, the awe and wonder of life. We talk about angel numbers and we talk about spirit animals, and that is just as important, but that is the light. And then we have the dark, and you need both. There, when you ebb and flow between the light and the dark teaches you how to bring in the light. And that is the alchemy of life. And life starts happening through you and for you and not at you. And when I was drinking, life was happening at me.
Yeah.
Because I was stuck in that dreaded drama triangle.
I love that. Dreaded. You did recommend that book, and I wanted to bring your book onto the podcast. I think I told you we're moving, so I was like, boxes. I'm like, I don't know where I put this, but we're gonna link it in the show notes.
All good.
So it's like, darn it, and I haven't read Ted yet. But I think you're so right. Like community and just allowing yourself, because again, we're told like that martyr or that prosecutor, or, you know, those things, that victim, right? And admittedly, like sometimes that victim feels good, right? It's like, I want that attention. Yeah, I want people, okay, like this is really hard. And if you were me, you'd feel bad. Okay, and it's like at some point letting that go is hard.
It is hard because, especially like, so if you're raised maybe with somebody who models being a victim or being a martyr or being a nurturer or being a rescuer, even somebody who's a persecutor, that's etched into you. And that is where so if you carry curiosity in your right hand and compassion in your left, so you get curious, oh, this is coming up again. Keeps coming up. Interesting. I'm so curious why the same pattern and behavior keeps coming up that was a protector for me all of my life.
Yes.
And then you have compassion for it, like I said, with the parts, because there are no bad parts of you. So let's talk about perfection for a second, because I love another book, again, avid reader.
Love it.
The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control was a game changer for me. Catherine Scheffler wrote that book.
Okay.
And she talks about how we all say, oh, I'm a recovering perfectionist. And that is not good, right? Because then we're kind of shaming ourselves. We're saying like perfectionism is not a good thing. And I have that perfectionism in me as a Virgo. I'm the oldest. I'm a Manny Jen, right? I've got all the things that are like wanting me to be a perfectionist. That's the way that my energetic blueprint kind of shows up too. And so, what she teaches in the book is that there are adaptive and maladaptive behaviors. So let me explain this. So adaptive would be, as a perfectionist, I'm going to show up on time. I'm going to, have done probably my research on your podcast about the book, whatever it is, right? I'm going to dot my I's and cross my T's. That's a good thing, right? I'm going to show up. I'm going to be on time. A maladaptive perfectionist is, I didn't do enough. Why did I say it like that? I could have done better. I'm not worth, so you start going into a maladaptive perfectionist. So it's being the observer. Am I in an adaptive place or am I in a maladaptive place? I do this with my overfunctioning. I will go where I'm like, I need to do more work. I need to do more work because I have this thing in me. A part of me, one of my parts, which is not a bad part, that thinks that I have to hustle and grind to show my value and worth, which is an intoxicating lie. So when I am exhausted, but that little protective part's like, but you could crank out another reel and you could write another blog and you could, do 6 more things, right? This is the voice that I hear.
Yes. Yeah.
I have to say, okay, that is little Meg, who never wanted to disappoint her parents. That's little Meg, who was told she wouldn't be this is in my book, one of the stories. I was told as a child I would amount to nothing. You were told the same thing.
I was told I wanted to be a therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist. And I went to my college counselor at the beginning to like set my courses.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, I really want to go into like forensic psychology. I want to understand how the brain works. I want to help people. I want to like do this. She goes, you're not smart enough. You should do sociology instead.
Exactly.
And I was like, oh, and I let that voice be louder. And I didn't tell my parents until 5 years ago, maybe.
Yes.
Like, and my mom was like, what? This is someone that's supposed to guide young adults into their passion. And so like, now I'm going back and I mean, coaching and somatic therapy, and I have lots of knowledge that I take to use. But I was just talking to someone the other day and I was like, I want to go back, I think, and get my master's in social work so I can become a licensed therapist. Like, I think, she's like, why? And I was like, because I think it, XYZ. Is it for you, or is it to kind of go back to kind of prove, to prove something? Because really, in the grand scheme of things, like the work that you're doing now is really impactful and helpful. And so this is going to be just, something to get your master's at the end. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of money. Like, is that something you really thought about doing? Or is it, I'm like, yeah, but yeah, I had that too. Like, you're not enough.
Same thing happened to me. So when I was I think it was 5th grade, my mom took us to a prominent psychiatrist in town who did IQ testing. And when I was done my test, she said, your score was really low and you have really nothing going for you other than that you can draw. You're going to, in so many words, you're going to amount to nothing. You will.
You were 10? You were in 5th grade?
Yeah. Yeah.
What did that do for you? How did that inform you?
So I went into this over-functioning, proving my worth, like you said, and I never told my parents. I never told my parents of you till recently. And so that little girl who heard that shows up all the time in me and is like, no, we have to do 10 more things.
I have to prove myself.
I have to prove my worth. And so now I go in for a hug with her. This is what somatic therapy taught me.
Little Meg.
Of course she's showing up. She had to do that for 20 years, right? That's a long time. That's etched into every fiber of my being. It's not, so instead of meeting it with resistance, like shame and why is that little girl popping up again? No, come in with compassion and acceptance and love for her. And then she goes, oh, okay.
You see me.
Okay.
Thank you.
You see me. Yeah.
How old is little Meg?
Like 5th grade, 10 years old. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so now I can go back to her and love on her. And then she backs down and says, okay, you see me, you love me, you validate me. And then I say to myself, I've done enough today, or I'm just going to take 3 aligned baby step actions today.
Yes.
That's it. And that is enough. It's not that I sit back and not do anything and be lazy. It's not that. It's that I see that part of me that came up from when I was a child, and I meet her with the most compassion I can find within myself. And if you can't find compassion for yourself, this is where you have to get into therapy or with a coach or with, a community that can help support you, because there are times where you can get stuck and you're like, and I've been there too. So I am just, if you can afford it, and I know it's a privilege, therapy, but I'm just a huge proponent. And I tell the women in my group, like, this is where I'm guiding you on this emotional sobriety journey, but I am not a licensed therapist. I had the same thing as you, Hilary. I thought I had to go get my licensing and coaching, degree and all the things that you're saying too, because that little girl was like, well, we're not good enough.
We're not good enough.
We're not good enough.
And those credentials are going to tell us we're good enough.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's an intoxicating lie. And same thing my coach said to me, you're already leading women. You're a transformational guide. You're just guiding them. You're giving them the resources to a licensed therapist. You're giving them the books, the podcasts, the meditations. You're guiding, you're supporting them. That's all you need to do. You don't have to go and get the 25 credentials you think you need to do what you're doing. And it's almost like we need to hear those permission slips sometimes too.
We do. We do, by someone we trust, right? Like because I worked with the coach, and that's kind of part of my story, is why I got into coaching, and I wanted to do it. But for me, like I wanted to get the credentials and the ICF, and I wanted to go through the, the programming because I wanted more. But this master's thing is next level. Like I might not, I might be okay where I am. But
And I
I
think with
love,
the Manny Gen, which we're talking about human design, if anybody doesn't
yes.
know what that is, it's very, so both Hilary and I you're a manifesting generator too, right?
I'm a generator.
Oh,
I'm a
you're a
doer.
generator.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have to have the idea presented to me and then I run with it. But you can have the idea and run.
But I also get the permission slip to not finish everything. So like I come up with a lot of ideas. So I'm in sales, I've written a book, I'm running a community.
Right.
Like I like to have a lot of different kind of balls in the air. And I have people say to me a lot of times, like, how do you do it all? And,
Mhm.
kind of shame me a little bit and like, you know, how are you doing everything? And aren't you exhausted? And that's a lot on your plate. And what human design did for me, which is, if anybody's listening and is like, what is human design? It's an energetic blueprint based on your birth date, time, and place of where you were born. It also gave me the permission slip to say that energetically for me is in alignment for me. I am a person that likes to have a lot of different projects going on. That feels good to my body, to my energy. And so I had done the Enneagram, Myers-Briggs personality tests, and those were good, right? Like those give you a little insight into you. But who am I energetically? And that it's okay to want to do all these things instead of saying, oh, that's the girl that's trying to do too much to prove herself.
Yes.
So again, adaptive, maladaptive. What is your personality type? Is this in alignment for you?
Yes. And I had that too, I'm a 5-1 emotional generator. And mine was that I'm always a knowledge seeker. That's in my energetic blueprint. But, before discovering human design, I had someone say, like, you just float and you don't stick to anything. And because I have these different, I've done photography and PR but the idea of my blueprint is that like I learn everything I can about anything and I can either stay there for an extended period of time or I'm like, okay, I'm good. I've learned enough about that. So I'm a naturally curious person, right? And I love learning more and obtaining knowledge and sharing it with others.
Yeah.
But to somebody else, I look scattered or I
Right.
lack direction. But yes, I love that. And I love when you're adaptive and maladaptive too, like this idea of helpful and harmful, right? It's
Yes.
kind of that same way to think about it. Like, are these patterns helpful for me or are they, harmful? And touching what I've learned from therapy and this inner child that I want to share that was really helpful for me too, is that when I go in and I can talk to little Hilary, you can go in and talk to little Meg and tell her that she is safe, seen, and protected, then that's kind of like my intuition too. Like I can protect that little voice inside of me, right? And saying like, okay, you're safe. It's okay. Because when I feel safe and my boundaries are held, then I'm a better person for everybody else.
That's right.
But when you talk about that achiever, right? Like showing up, doing it for others and doing it for you and being here and being all the places. And I'm so tapped out. Little Hilary is pissed. Like she's so mad at me. I mean, I've had her tell me to get away before. Like I remember doing an inner child work. Yes. And she crossed her arms and she's stomping her feet. She's like, get away from me. And I was like, I was working with someone during this particular session. So I was telling her and she's like, oh, okay. And I was in a very, it's about 3 years ago and I was in a very challenging transition in my life. And so looking back, it makes sense, but it is a really powerful practice.
It is a powerful practice. And just like we were able to rewire our brains with alcohol, the whole alcohol
Yeah.
thing, we can do this with our emotional well-being as well. And that is what the emotional sobriety journey is all about.
I love this.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your the workshop you had this weekend and kind of the women that you guide and right back to you. Talk about that. I know you have a wait list coming up for January. What does that look like? Do you top it off? Share a little bit about that program. It sounds really wonderful.
Yes, thank you. So when alcohol was no longer an issue, I craved a space where I could slow down and reconnect with this inner knowing and explore all these things that were coming up with like-minded women.
Yeah,
So when you can't find it, you create it as a manifesting generator for sure.
that's right.
And so,
A book, a space, a community. I love it.
so I created this community and we go through 12 months. And that's why it only opens up once a year because every month we choose a topic. So First month was on intuition. I told you kind of what we explored in there with meditation and hearing our intuition. Next month is how do you become the creator of your life? Another month is on joy and awe and wonder. Another month is on grief. So like we are going through, and my sister, who's a licensed therapist, is on the calls supporting women as we go through these transitions. I don't want anybody to think I'm just kind of like bringing up really hard things and leaving you out there to swim.
Yeah.
We have meditations, podcasts, and books to support that month that are optional for the women to do to support them as they go through this topic. We are in a private Marco Polo group together where we're supporting each other as things are coming up or the aha awakenings are happening, which is so cool. And what I have found, we have tools within Right Back to You where we use artwork. So neurographica, which is a modality of drawing that rewires the brain and replaces new neurons with new thoughts. And we have a neurographica specialist who comes in to teach the women. We have another woman who does heart journaling. And so I had one of my members that could never express herself. She had a really, really tough childhood where she was told she wasn't wanted. There's no baby pictures of her. I mean, a really, really tough childhood. And so she could never express herself. And so when she learned heart journaling, where she could cut different things out of magazines to express her emotions, you should see the beauty that is showing up on her pages and the little girl that is coming out of her. And so she's told me, I just found my voice. I know who I am now. And so we have tools in Right Back to You to literally help you find your voice, to step into your agency, I've given my platform over to these women to come in and teach this. So my members are the neurographica specialists, are the heart journaling specialists. So they are saying, Meg, you've given me this platform. You've empowered me to come in and teach this. I think I want to go do this now in my life. And so it's women believing in women and women saying, you're safe here. You can show up messy. We will find the beauty in it. And finding their voice, what makes their soul come alive. And I was going to just do maybe a few months of this. And they said to me, we never want this to end. They don't want the community to ever end. So after a year, all the cohorts merge together and they become this big community. And right now we're doing the chakras. So we're learning about the 7 chakras. So there's so much to Earth School to learn, and we are not taught this as children. So again, right, we weren't warned what alcohol was. So it's not our fault, but it is our responsibility, right? It's the same thing with emotional sobriety. We don't have an Earth School, which we should, that teaches you how to sit with these hard emotions, that teaches you how these triggers are invitations to grow. We don't learn about our intuition. We don't learn about all of these modalities that allow you to be the bright light that is your soul's purpose, is just to shine your light as brightly as you can in this world. But we have so many layers of conditioning from society, culture, family. And so we have to, this is why it's 12 months, because we have to peel back each layer, and each topic builds upon the last. And so that you can fully step into your light, and you're not broken. It's already there. We need to shed the past versions of ourselves with that compassion that you and I talked about. And so that's what we do. It's very hard to explain in like one sentence because there's so much to it.
What a beautiful community. And like you said, I had the opportunity to meet some of these women this weekend, and it's just
So the other thing
warming.
we have is guest speakers. So you were this beautiful guest speaker that came in, and the women were so touched by your story and your wise words. And we're talking about it the rest of the day. I mean, women were crying with you, laughing with you. And so I just thank you, because I know that your platform is called The Right Room, but you have a gift, Hilary, where you make people feel like they are the only person in the room. You have done that with me. You have done that with my members. Like, you have this amazing gift where you truly make someone feel seen, heard, loved, and validated. And I just feel so grateful that our paths cross. So I thank you.
Me too, right? Like from you talk about where it's not existing, right? Like that's what I want to, I want to feel seen and validated and connected. And um, yeah, I think connection to me is the most important thing, whether it's one-on-one or a group. Like I never want anybody to feel left out or unseen or like their
And I
voice
didn't mean
doesn't
to say I
matter.
don't like the right room, because I love that too, because you
No.
talked about that in your talk, which is that we will attract the right people. And I think in this whole journey, whether it was with alcohol or even emotional sobriety, I
Yeah.
started choosing me and what was in alignment for me. And I lost people because
Yes.
I chose my truth. I didn't choose what was in alignment for them. I chose what was in alignment for me. And so I love that your platform is called The Right Room, because you will attract the right people. And it's okay to lose people in your life. I think as women, we don't have a language when we lose friendships
Yeah.
like we do with divorce. And that is okay. Like, these people come in for reasons and seasons, and cherish that memory with them. But it's okay if they're not the right people, and they're not in the right room anymore too. So I love that you call it The Right Room too. I didn't mean to say like a, yeah.
Oh, I didn't even. Yeah, I didn't even take it. But yeah, I love that because that was what initially it's like. People aren't going to like me, right? Because when I started sharing my story of recovery and sobriety, it's like there are people that aren't going to like me, or there are going to people that be like, "We don't care, like be quiet," and those aren't my people. You are my people, right? People that want to do the work, that are interested, that are interesting, that aren't. But I was that person for a long time where I was like, oh, shut up, nobody wants to hear you, right? Or because there was something lacking in me. Because to your point, like when we feel full and confident and loved and supported, because we go inside and like support that little Meg and little Hilary,
Yeah.
then other people can't affect us like that. It doesn't matter. Like I don't have that same annoyance or irritation. I'm just like, okay, well, we don't align, and that's okay.
It's okay.
I'm going to go over here. But there's no judgment or anger or, any of those.
Nope. Yeah. And this is again where life is just happening for you, and the divine timing that it's happening.
I love divine timing. I'm a huge, it's like, it's all meant to be. It's all meant like, and you turned me onto James Doty. And so thank you so much. The book, I'm going to read that into the magic shop. I have Mag Magic that I love, but I love that he talks about that. And another one.
And Laura
Bob.
Love Harden that you had on ghost wrote Into the Magic Shop. So it is written by Laura Love Harden. Did you know that? She was a ghost writer, as you know, for many books, like
I
Desmond
did know
Tutu's
that,
book.
but I didn't know that
She
it
wrote James Doty's Into the Magic Shop. And she's an incredible writer.
Laura Love Harden, you're getting a call from me again. I did not know this about her. I know she's just amazing, and I love her as a human, and I think she's funny and smart and creative and just like a beautiful person. But I did not know that.
Yeah, you'll love it.
Did you say she's a gem?
Yeah.
Yeah, my friend Nisha, who was on here, she calls women that she loves. She's like, they're just gems. They're these gems in her life, and I was like, oh, she has a gem, and you're a gem. Meg, tell us 3 things that. Sorry. Give us 3 things, as women that are going through transition, 3 things that have been really helpful to you or tools that you've used to navigate these transitions, whether it was,
Mm-hmm.
drinking, kind of moving through some trauma. What are 3 things that are just your favorite tips, tricks, tools, quotes?
Well, I think that you have to realize you're not broken. There's nothing that needs fixing. Number one, that you're whole and complete. You are enough, and that you just have this conditioning and programming that's covering up that gem. That you are a gem, and we just have to expose your light, and you will radiate again. And how do we do that? With that, what I said, if you hold curiosity in one hand, why is this coming up for me? And you get into work with somebody, you get help, and you stay compassionate for yourself and say, of course she's showing up this way. Of course, this is your little you that needs to be heard, loved, and validated. And so if you can't afford to be in therapy, then I really recommend the two-way prayer, which is, again, in my book. If you want to look it up, or look up Elizabeth Gilbert's love letters on Substack. So I do want to give her credit for it, which is, dear little Meg, little Hilary, what would you have me know today? Or maybe it's that you need to write to that little self and say, even I've had people say, dear God, I'm really struggling with blah, 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 right? Get it all out.
Mm-hmm.
Let it be, and then sit in silence for just a few minutes and kind of hear what's coming up from that, and then write back in a very compassionate, loving way. Little love bug. Of course you want to get it right. You had to do that your whole childhood, you little hummingbird. You're so used to
Oh, I
buzzing
love
around and taking care of everyone's needs. That makes sense. Like, write this really fun, loving, compassionate letter back to yourself. I have chills.
I
I'm
love
telling you,
this.
there is so much power in this exercise.
So as you're sharing this, right, like full transparency, what's coming up, I'm like, it feels really cheesy. Not because I don't, but like I'm thinking of writing it to myself, like little love. I'm like, why would I give myself that compassion? And I didn't realize I was lacking as much as I am until you started. Because why wouldn't I call myself a little love bug or sweet little hummingbird? Like, why not? I'm gonna do this. Thank you for that one. Because
Yeah, and
that's
you can read poetry to kind of inspire yourself before you do this, or if there's somebody's writing that you really love, or music that you like to listen to kind of inspire those words for you
yes.
to describe you. But it just is this inner knowing that wants to come out and show you unconditional love. And if you read Elizabeth Gilbert's love letters, you will see how so many people, celebrities and authors, have done these letters, and so they will inspire you. I would say the last thing is really some form of exercise. Even when I was going through becoming alcohol free, where you're taking yourself and just working through these emotions that are coming up, because it's big energy that's coming through you,
Mm.
and you have to release it in some way, whether it's with a walk. Kill two birds with one stone. So I go on my walk, I find the beauty in the day, I collect heart rocks, or it could be a sunset, it could be a leaf in the shape of a heart, it could be a bird, anything. When you start seeing the world around you, and I couldn't do this when I was drinking because it was always a slight shade of gray. It was always foggy for me. I was always working off a hangover. When you can see all the beauty that is around you, and it's there to create that joy, because like I said, the joy, the awe and wonder. Look for the angel numbers. Look for the little spirit animal. Maybe, a cardinal reminds you of a loved one that's passed. Look for that cardinal. Look for it, because the universe, God, is always trying to communicate to you when you're not feeling it, that you are loved, protected, and wanted. And so it's showing up all around us, but sometimes we're so busy and on autopilot, we don't tune into it. We have to slow down, to listen to ourselves, to find the beauty in the day, and to give the compassion to ourselves. So those would be my three things.
Meg, I love this so much. I'm gonna go write a letter to my little inner Hillary and see what she wants to say.
I would love to hear it if you're willing to share.
I I will. I will. That is my commitment. I will write it and I will share it with you. So thank you for holding me accountable and for also being a safe space to explore these.
Thank you. I
These.
love this conversation, and I feel so safe with you too. And there's just this immediate connection with you and I. We're just on the same wavelength, vibrating at the same frequency. And you just can't do that with alcohol. You just
No,
can't.
you can. And that's what people still talk about, like wanting to, heal and find your voice, and like really, alcohol is the first thing. It's to really anesthetize it. Whether it brings down your vibration, it makes you numb. I mean, because that's what we wanted. I wanted to check out and anesthetize and just be gone, right? And that's exactly what it does. And so, I agree. All right, we're gonna tag all of your book, and where can people find you online?
At intoxicatinglies.com. So it's the name of the book. If you put in Meg Geisewite, it would take you there too, but nobody knows how to spell Geisewite. So it's much easier to say intoxicatinglies.com. And you can find my book there. You can get a signed copy of my book there. I'm also on Amazon and all the bookstores. And the Right Back to You community is there as well. So if you want to sign up for the wait list, there's a button there to get on the wait list, and it opens up in January of 2025.
I love this conversation. I look forward to more of them in the future. Meg, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Hello, and welcome to the Right Room with Hilary Phelps. Today I'm talking to Meg Geisewite, and Meg is one of the first people who taught me about the concept of gray area drinking. Her story, our stories are completely different. Meg was a social drinker and realized in this one moment that maybe alcohol was taking a bigger presence in her life than she would have wanted. So Meg is the author of Intoxicating Lies. She's the leader of the group Right Back to You, which is this beautiful community of women. And I think everybody is going to take a lot from this conversation. Meg and I really dive into not just sobriety, but a lot about female intuition, empowerment, listening to that inner voice. And so without further ado, here's Meg.